Welcome to the Sultans of Spine podcast. I'm your host, Jameel Pendleton. And the Sultans of Spine podcast is intended to bring people, unique people, and interesting people into your world through the art of storytelling. And one of the things that I learned early on in the relationship sales industry is that nothing beats a conversation, and that conversations can lead to many great things, can lead to new discoveries, can lead to education, motivation, inspiration, those types of things. So I'm honored today to introduce our guest, Mr. Jim Donnelly. Jim and I don't know one another that well. Matter of fact, Jim, last time I saw you was around this time yesterday after we just completed the Murph workout with some of your family and friends at Restore. So much different circumstances, but thank you for coming on. Jim, as a former Army officer, you married a West Point grad, and now you're the CEO of one of the fastest growing companies in the world, the hottest franchise in America. I think you guys were 100 or 113th fastest growing private company. I mean, that's incredible. And we can definitely get into that. But I would like to just start this off about maybe if you could introduce yourself, kind of where you grew up, whatever, just so that our audience can get to know you a little bit, like I have over these last couple of days.
Sure. Well, I'll start by saying thank you for having me, and thank you for joining us at the Murph Challenge yesterday. We do that every year. That was the fourth year in a row we've done it here in Austin. For those who don't know the Murph Challenge, it's around a Lieutenant Murphy that won the Medal of Honor. But more importantly, we do it because one of Stacy's classmates at West Point was killed in that same day of action trying to rescue those Navy SEALs. So it's pretty personal for us. So we love it when people come out and join us. It's hard, but it's a lot more fun when a bunch of people do it. So all about me. I grew up an Army brat. I lived all over the world. My dad loved the military. And then when he got out, he kind of tried to find his way, and he tried to do it by being an entrepreneur. And he was not a particularly successful entrepreneur in many ways. He tried a lot of stuff. They didn't work out, but he never lost his enthusiasm. He's sort of the most optimistic person that I know. He was always trying things. I mean, we had a propane powered car in the 80s. And
wow,
when you're traveling across the country and you have to go get propane, it's not like pulling in a gas station. So we'd pull in farmhouses, and people would be, well, we'll get you propane, but it's dinner time. Why don't you come in and join us? And so I kind of grew up in that kind of,
it's amazing,
experimental, entrepreneurial household once my dad got out of the military. And I knew I would be an entrepreneur as well. So I started my first company when I was in grad school. It was a funny, weird company. Go get golf balls out of water hazards, take them back to a factory, ship them to Europe, and sell them there. Wow. It was millions of golf balls, and it was sort of lost and found in America. But I could tell all kinds of stories of diving with alligators and snakes and all kinds of funny stories.
It's fascinating.
But that was obviously low tech. That was back in the early 90s. So I've sort of graduated from those kind of businesses, but I went and fulfilled my military commitment. I came out of the military, knew I wanted to build my skills. So I was a brand manager on at Kraft Foods for Jell-O pudding and Cool Whip. So it was interesting going from supporting a Ranger battalion to marketing Jell-O pudding and Cool Whip. Obviously my friends gave me a hard time about that.
Oh my gosh.
But that was cool. And left there, went to work at Coca-Cola, helped develop international brands for Coca-Cola, helped start a retail group for AT&T, ran a big brand. Yes, Coca-Cola. I hope they don't ruin Topo Chico.
So do I.
Coca-Cola does have a way of scaling things and changing things. So I hope they don't mess with Topo Chico. But just a series of blue chip companies. And then in 2001, started an online travel community called I Go You Go with a good buddy of mine from Citibank. And worst possible time to start a travel company.
Oh,
We
one,
started
yeah.
about 2 months before 9/11. So
Right.
the good news is it made it impossible to raise money. We had to
Right.
figure it out, and we did. And so 4 years later, we won a Webby Award for the top travel site in the US, and we sold the company to Travelocity. And since then, I've had the financial ability to do what I want. And the mandate has been do things that I'm passionate about and do things that help society in some small or some big way.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
My
So that's me
dogs.
in a nutshell. Lived all over, tried a bunch of stuff. Going to try a bunch more before I'm done.
That's awesome. And that's inspiring to hear, I think, on a lot of fronts. I mean, to hear your story about your father and entrepreneurialism that you saw from an early age, and just kind of having that seed planted in you that this is what I want to do, and seeing him continually have that just seeking for new ways to grow and to build and those types of things. That's pretty cool. But then some of these businesses, I mean, that the golf balls, selling them to Europe, it reminds me, this podcast episode is not about me, but maybe over a beer, we can talk about some of my backpacking, traveling. We did some interesting entrepreneurial things to make money because we were backpacking and traveling throughout the world. So, well, that's awesome. So tell me, so you started you sold the company Travelocity. You had the funds to do what you wanted, as you mentioned. And then where did Restore come in to the picture? Because Restore is something that I've recently found as such an awesome way to recover from tough workouts like Murph, right? But
Yeah.
how did that start?
Yeah. So, there was definitely a gap between when I sold I Go, You Go and Restore. There was about a 10-year gap. And during that time, I helped start a really high-end health club on the East Coast, the Charlotte Athletic Club. So it was definitely dabbling in the world of health and fitness at a high level. Did some real estate development, bought some old bank buildings in Charlotte and created homes for Michael Jordan and Daughtry and Cam Newton and Boris Diaw. So just really unique, special places to live. And my construct has always been to do things that are unique and special so that it's easy to, quote unquote, sell them. I don't like to say sell them, but it's a lot easier to get people interested in things that have real substance, that are unique, that are super cool. And so about 5 years ago, I was training for a triathlon. At the time, I was 46. I was pretty beat up. I'd been a pretty high level athlete, had done, sports all my life, the military stuff, and was just feeling it. That's what happens when you get to be 46. And a buddy happened to say, "Hey, go try cryotherapy." I thought it was kind of silly, to be honest. I thought, wow, that sounds like a gimmick. But I was like, all right, I'll give it a chance though, because I know cold therapy works. So I went and tried it, and cryotherapy made me feel better right away. I said, oh my gosh, this is great. But I hated everything else about the retail experience. It was in a crappy little office park. The environment wasn't very nice. It was way too expensive. And so I didn't necessarily come up with the idea of the things we do at Restore, but I came up with a better way to put them together.
Absolutely.
So we created this construct we call hyper wellness. It's what we think is a little better than the traditional wellness category. We put a bunch of modalities together. We created a really sophisticated medical infrastructure, a national telemedicine platform. And now we can have people come in, we can figure out what works for them best. We can stack different modalities into a personalized protocol. And we ultimately get really good results. People always walk out of Restore feeling better than when they walked in. But, it's been like I said, it's been a 5-year journey. So we didn't just snap our fingers and go from that first store that we tried to the 100 that we have today. So there was a lot of hard work in between.
Absolutely. And for me, what you just described is what I experienced when I first walked into Restore. It's just the a la carte or whatever it is about the fact that there's programming. There's a lot of smart people who have put those modalities together. Me as a customer or a client recognizes that, right? Very, 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 very easily. And I like the intentionality of that. It reminds me in an odd way of the first time I ever went snow skiing was inside of a mall in Dubai. And what I mean by that is I walked into this place in my shorts and sandals, and everything was taken care of, from your gear to your clothes and your lessons. And you just paid for that experience. And that's what Restore was, at least initially. Like, everything's taken care of. Because I don't know the first thing about cryotherapy or red light therapy or any of the things, the sauna that you guys have, the hyperbaric chamber. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's all there. And that was just really, really neat. And I think I might've told you this, or Dave Fossis might've told you this. Dave is who introduced me to Restore through a burpee challenge. And that really kind of was a catalyst moment for me to get my life back on track, and to get more physically fit and just having wellness at the center. And as an aging father myself, I'm 41 years old. I these types of technologies and these therapies allow me to do that at a high level and stay efficient and continue to do workouts. Not like we're going to do Murph every day, but continue to do those types of things at a high level as we age, and kind of a parallel into my world is that as technology and spine surgery improves through technology, right? Surgeons are doing similar things for their patients, right? Yeah. Less disruptive surgery is kind of the new thing, right? The better for the patient, the better the outcome, right? Then the better that surgery is going to be. And then ultimately that surgeon will be able to treat more people or be more efficient about their day. So I totally get where you're coming from.
I find doctors to fall in three camps. There's the camp that I know what I was taught. I was taught that whether it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I've kind of stayed in that lane. And to be quite frank, I haven't really expanded my knowledge base. And that works for some, although the world of healthcare is changing. I find that to be a more and more anachronistic sort of approach to medicine. Then you got the bucket that are all in on the alternative stuff. The traditional stuff works, but if you put a dose of the alternative stuff on top, it works even better. And they're very intellectually curious. They dive in. They know what cryo is. They know what IVs do for you. Prophylactically, they know all of these things, and they're very eager to marry their traditional practice with an alternative approach. And then you got the ones in the middle that are kind of like, I don't know, like I kind of like both. I definitely like my traditional thing because that's what I went to school for and done all my life. I think I like this other alternative stuff, but I definitely know that it's not hurting people. And my patients come in and they rave about it. And so I'm kind of like, hey, listen, if it makes you feel better, go for it. And that middle bucket is getting bigger. And that second bucket of doctors exploring the full range of stuff is getting bigger as well. And that first bucket is getting smaller and smaller by the day. And I think it's driven by the fact that this alternative stuff really works. And I think it's driven by the fact they don't have a choice. The way that healthcare is changing and reimbursements and deductibles. There's a better way. And we are certainly compatible with traditional medicine. We are in no way, shape, or form against traditional medicine, but we do think an approach that fixes people after they're sick or after they're hurt is not the best way. A much better approach is to fix people before they get sick, before they get hurt, help them recover and take care of themselves better, help them to boost their immunity and all these sort of things. And we've obviously been one of the poster children of success during coronavirus. We've grown 400%. We opened a ton of stores. 125 people are working in the corporate offices, and we've been here since last April. We never shut down our stores. And I tell people, like, take coronavirus out of it, by the way, and substitute, back injury, spine surgery, diabetes, cancer, chronic disease, whatever it is you want, virus of some other name, substitute. It's the same solution. It's be proactive, control what you can control, boost your immunity, address your micronutrients, sleep a little better, put the right foods in your body. Don't be perfect, but do a little better. Have good friendships, be a part of something meaningful, tap into community. I mean, I could list the sort of 10 to 15 super important things. They're the solution for all of the health problems in America to a certain degree.
It's so well said.
Yeah, we continue to operate for the most part on the healthcare side in a world of let's fix it after it's broken. And I fundamentally don't think that's the best idea. And if there's any frustration I have with coronavirus, it's that more people haven't taken it as an opportunity to get on a better path. And so clearly you're a motivated guy and you did take that as an opportunity. But obesity is still a massive problem in America and getting worse. People, they're looking for easy answers, and a pill's an easy answer. And, I can tell you, there's a bad ending for virtually every pill that you take on a long-term basis.
That's right. I mean, there's so much of what you just said that I'm just trying to unpack. First off, I agree with everything 1,000%. I think that's why I already liked you from the moment I met you. But that is what you just said. Not just so the three types of physicians, right? Spot on. There's also three types of sales reps. So I'm here trying to mentor and coach younger generation of sales reps in this healthcare med tech space. And there are those that don't want to adopt new technology, don't want to learn robotic assisted spine surgery. They don't want to get comfortable being uncomfortable. The reality of it is that's where the market's going, because as you said, they're not going to have a choice. The surgeons are going to want to learn this because their patients are going to start asking about it. And then the payers, as you said, are going to start demanding it. It's just going to happen. And so I've always been of that, camp that you mentioned, kind of, I'm all in. And I'm launching a podcast. Like, I don't know the first thing about this, but I know that connections are important. Relationships are everything. That's how I've been successful throughout my sales career, is just creating relationships with people, not just the end user and the buyer, but the whole ecosystem of the hospital. And I was at IBM before that, the whole ecosystem of information technology. And that's awesome. And then to your point on the coronavirus or 2020 being a reset opportunity, absolutely. And is sad and I guess just unfortunate that it was for a lot of people. I consider it a blessing. In a weird way, I do consider 2020 a blessing for me and my family, right? Take nothing away for those. And it was, look, Jim, it was one of the lowest earning years that I've had in a long time, because elective surgeries, they weren't happening nearly at the rate that they have always been. But in terms of growth, both personally, professionally, spiritually, in my relationships, right? It gives you that opportunity to push pause and do a status check on where you are. What am I doing today? Where do I want to be? What am I doing today to get there? And what am I going to be remembered by? Right. And I'm a dad, as you are. Like, there are little kids, little eyeballs watching every single thing that I do. And so this morning, we said another prayer for the soldiers that gave their lives for our freedom, because it's not just about Memorial Day. It's about being thankful every day and leading them towards that mentality of, man, what a gift we have to live this life.
I mean, I will say the whole role of being the whole thing about being a role model and helping folks sort of get on a better path. I mean, I don't know that I deliberately go out of my way to do those sort of things, but success kind of puts a magnifying glass on you, and the more successful you are, the more people want to ask you your approach and how did you do it? And for me, it's pretty simple. I do things that I'm passionate about. I tend to try to make a business around things that not only I'm passionate about, but they do help society and that sort of thing. And when you have those two ingredients, it's pretty easy to be passionate about your work. It's pretty easy to show up every day and have enthusiasm and all of the sort of joie de vivre type things that make people excited about being with you in the journey. And then being self-aware, super important. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not. I surround myself with smart people. I make sure I fill the gaps where I'm not good at something. And then you just kind of have to plug away for a while, and you know that it's not going to happen automatically. It's not going to happen overnight. And generally, if you do all that, and probably helps to have a good idea, things are going to work out really well. And I do look at this as a generational opportunity to do something massively impactful for society, massively impactful for the healthcare and wellness industries. And to be quite frank, as a dad, that's part of what makes it cool, because I get to go home and my kids are into it. They love going to school, and their friends have done cryo, and their friends have heard about what we're doing, and their friends' dads and moms are doing it. And they can literally put their finger on it. It's not, me sitting in a cube every day doing something on a computer that they can't relate to. They're now at the age where they do all the recovery modalities as well. And so it's really cool to have my son come up to me at dinner and say, "Hey, Dad, what the numbers look like today?" Or, "Hey, Dad, how's so-and-so doing at work? I remember you talking on the phone to them." And they're always listening. They're always watching. And you think that they don't care about what you're doing, but they are looking to you to be a role model, both personally and professionally, and how they interact with people, and all kinds of wonderful things. So
just as you looked up to your father, as you mentioned earlier.
That's right. Like, listen, and I think my dad would echo this. I wanted to be a better version of my dad, and I want my son and daughter to be a better version of me and my wife. And I am a better entrepreneur than my dad was. I honed my trade. I went and worked at a lot of blue chip companies to sort of create a pedigree and a knowledge base. I have done a really good job of forming long-term relationships with really smart people. And I think if you look at my track record, I've definitely been a better entrepreneur than my dad. But I wouldn't be an entrepreneur if it wasn't for my dad. And I wouldn't be an entrepreneur if he let the setbacks, get him down. I've seen what bankruptcy looks like. I've seen what, money problems look like. I've seen what, passion for an idea that doesn't work looks like. And to be quite frank, it was very motivating. Like, I don't want that to happen. And by the way, I've had entrepreneurial failures as well, but fortunately it's been in a sequence where I had the good ones, and then you can play around a little more, and you can have some that don't necessarily work out like you expected, but don't lose everything. Keep a little dry powder so that if you have to try something else, you can. But I owe that to my dad. I mean, my dad was always trying things and pushing me, and my mom and dad were wonderful. My mom was super conservative. Hold on, don't do that. My dad was go, go, go. And the combination of the two of them, once again, I think probably made me a better entrepreneur.
I'm glad you shared that, because it's very similar to my mother and father in both in their kind of their roles, their outlook, but, kind of what they provided, for me. And my dad, he just had the best attitude, and he failed, but then he got right back up, and he's inspiring to me in that regard. He's had small businesses. He's advertising executive, and worked for small companies and then big companies, and just kind of seeing that ebb and flow, and seeing how he handled adversity. He gave me a light in periods of darkness that I've actually most recently, when I lost my job and just through a restructuring had to reinvent myself and had to figure out what I was going to do. it was the model that my father showed me and my faith. Those are the things that helped get me through that time. And now I look at it as a blessing. And just like as 2020 was a blessing to reset physically, this was a blessing to reset my career. And it's happening. And but it's, as you said, your dad giving you the vision and it's okay to fail. We all fail. And we don't have all the answers either. That's another thing, that people that are successful don't have it all figured out. I think I would love your perspective on what's a common trait of successful people in your estimation or in your eyes.
Yeah, well, I will say this. I consider my life to be about as close to perfect as possible, knock on wood. But I do remind people all the time, you can't be the best father, the best entrepreneur, the best husband, the best friend, the best son, brother, all at once. I mean, there is a give and take with all of this stuff. And so I think I've got a pretty good balance. I definitely prioritize family when I need to. I don't miss my kids' games. I've coached, more times than I can remember. I'm there. I put a lot of effort into my marriage. I try to make sure that once a year I turn off the phone, the computer, and literally for 10 days, I'm out of contact with the world. There's just a variety of sort of hacks, so to speak, or methods that I use, but you can't be the best at everything. So you do have to sort of figure out how to balance it. I mean, the secret for me is I am pretty easygoing, and things don't get me down. I'm eternally optimistic. I do see the best in people, even people that have let me down. I have a pretty good ability to not discard them because maybe they didn't help me when they needed to. Maybe they took advantage of a situation. I kind of step back and say, well, everyone's got their own stuff they're figuring out and dealing with. So I'm not going to let what they did before limit what I'm going to do with them now within reason, because, that's a stupid way to look at life, writing people off. So once again, I think optimism, a resilience that lets you kind of move past things, some loyalty to good people. Like I'm good friends with every business partner I've ever had. I'm good friends with every girlfriend. I'm not good friends, but I'm friendly with any girlfriend I ever had. I mean, I just have never understood the carnage of blowing through a relationship and this person that you thought very highly of, and now you think nothing of them. And so, like I said, I don't discard people. And like I said, I'm very self-aware. I'm good at a lot of things. I'm really good at a lot of things. I'm good at selling. I'm good at a vision. I'm good at sort of getting people on a team and leading them and those sort of things. I'm not good at the little details. I don't like some of the financial stuff. And so I always have a good financial partner that's attuned to that. And, I could go on and on my weaknesses and strengths, but I think the most important thing is to be self-aware. And then I never, ever, ever look at another person's life or possessions or anything like that and say, I feel badly because I don't have what they have. Once again, I control what I can control. I'm happy with what I have. I want more. I want more things. I want a bigger business, a better business. I want to do as much as I possibly can. I want the nice things and the trappings of a nice life. But at the end of the day, I always say, and this sounds ludicrous, but I say $100 million wouldn't change my life one bit. I'm married to the same woman. I treat my kids the same. I drive the same truck. I'd live in the same house. Maybe I'd travel a little nicer, but I travel pretty nicely as it is. So there's really not much that would change other than the ability to maybe give more and do more for society. But life is good. And I think when you start questioning what I have enough in a way that takes a negative sort of path because you're worried that you don't have as much as other people, I think that's a real problem. And so those are that's sort of a rambling way to
No.
talk about some of the secrets for me. And, you know, I did have a perfect year last year. Our business thrived. Matter of fact, it provided a platform to do even more with our business last year. On a personal level, we definitely were out and about. We traveled all over the country. We went to South Dakota and Mount Rushmore, went to Utah, skied in Denver. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
So once again, we sort of took this approach that as long as we were controlling what we could with our health and being healthy, that you know, we could withstand anything that was out there. We spent a lot more time together as a family, you know, time that we're never going to get back.
Never.
My kids are 11 and 13, so you can imagine how lovely that is at that age. And I did, you know, continue to engage with my friends, and I can't think of a single time over the last, you know, 12, 14 months where I wasn't part of a group, a community, reaching out, going out, having dinners, traveling. But it wasn't willy-nilly. It was because I took control of the things that I could control. I was very focused on it. I you know, I didn't let things that are relatively controllable kind of keep me bottled up. And I'm quick to say, I get that a lot of people have had a bad time. They had bad outcomes. They've known people that were hurt by coronavirus. They lost their job, and all kinds of things. But like I said, I've looked at all the things like that as opportunities for doing something better. And so sometimes you need somebody to kick you in the butt and say, what you're doing is not your thing. It's not going to be the thing that gets you to where you want to go. And here, I'm setting you free. Now go, you know, spread your wings and prosper and find the thing you're supposed to be doing that you weren't doing before.
Absolutely. It's so well said, Jim. I absolutely agree with you. And that's how I have kind of processed this recent job change. It's been the best thing that's ever happened to me, because I am free, to your point. I forget it. Got a blank canvas, got new opportunities. And, you know, I think that it's that optimism that I also am an eternal optimist as yourself. It's just how are you going to show up? We control how we prepare. We control how we respond to adversity. We also control our outlook on things. And so it's not a magic trick. It's just getting your mind and your just everything in the right headspace to tackle the world's problems or your own problems locally. And that's kind of control the controllables. I say that all the time to my kids, right? They're playing sports now. I've talked about this on one of my silly videos, but you know, they've got to want to practice if they want to play more or play better. It's not something that my wife and I can force them to do. They've got to want it, right, inside. And while they may be good athletes and they can run fast, lacrosse, which is the game that we've just wrapped up playing, is a brand new sport. And I didn't play it. So they just got to go out there and listen to their coaches and really want to get better at that sport.
I mean, everything you're saying is the same lessons for life. And so training and fitness and sports, they all revolve around the notion of, if you're going to get better, you're going to put in the work, you're going to lay a foundation, and you're going to keep building on that and getting better and better. And so, you know, I've definitely had lots of advantages in my life. I have great parents, number one, that valued education. They said to me from the time I could remember, you're going to college, we're not paying for it, figure it out. No problem. I mean, I knew what I was dealing with, and I did figure it out, and I appreciated the value of that education. But awesome. I wouldn't have without parents like I had. They were great. And I've got a lovely sister that's super supportive if I ever need anything. And then I've got tons of great friends, and I don't have those great friends because I was a jackass all my life. I have those great friends because when they've needed me, I've been there. You know, I've done tons of things that I think are kind of a beacon of light for my friends and the people around me. And, you know, whether it's putting together things like Murph Challenge or 100 other things in the community, starting, you know, the flag football league in Lake Travis so the kids don't have to jump right to tackle football. I mean, I could go on and on with those things. but those kind of things build the foundation for why people want to help you, why people want to follow you, why people want to just be your friend.
Sure.
And so my lesson to people all the time is what you do does matter.
Mm-hmm.
And what you do does have repercussions and does have consequences. And so if you want to be a one-man gang and you want to be a jackass and you want to be arrogant and run over people, that does come back to hurt you, because at some point everybody needs some help. And
Yes.
if you're okay to get help and you've kind of done the right things, guess what? Help's going to come at you a lot more than the opposite. So these things aren't by mistake. So it does go back to control what you can control. And obviously, absolutely, having good parents, having good friends, having a lovely wife, having good kids. I mean, my kids they came out good kids.
Right.
Like now I hope I've made them better, but I'm lucky. Like I've knock on wood. I am in an extremely happy marriage. My kids are delightful. They're successful in all the things that they do. I think they work hard. They could probably work a little harder, be a little hungrier, but that's part of me trying to make their life a little easier than mine was. And these are just natural things that happen, but it's all good. And I do count my blessings. I certainly have faith, and I know that, as a Christian, there are things that happen for a reason beyond my control, but I do try to put myself in a good position. And so, and I do try to do the things that make it easier. I don't hang out around with dumbasses. I know my limitations. I know my temptations. So I make sure I create a life construct that keeps me away from them, not running towards them. And guess what I do? I do fewer stupid things because of it.
That's right.
If I have a friend that's going to take me in a bad direction, guess what? Sorry, dude. Like, we can't hang out. And the same thing applies to business, by the way. Like, if I have a friend that's not positively sort of helping me and helping me further my goals, or an employee that's not helping us move forward, well, once again, that's hey, I got to let you go and set you free. Because it's the same. It's in business. Surround yourself with good people. Stay away from the stupid distractions. Stay focused. Get help when you need it, because you're going to need some help. And then when people need you to reciprocate, by the way, you better be prepared to help them. And
yes.
And if you want advice from people, you better be prepared to give advice.
No, it's
all these things.
So true. So what you're talking about is very central theme of a great book by Adam Grant called Give and Take.
Yeah.
If you haven't read it,
I'll check it out.
It's very good. And he talks about the top percentile of CEOs, doctors, lawyers, sales professional, entrepreneurs, the best of the best, regardless of field, are givers. Okay. Takers represent the middle, givers represent the bottom, right? So you can give too much. But his point, to your point, is that reciprocity, or just for me in my business, just being a servant, helping everyone that I came in contact with. And then ultimately they wanted to help me. And that's kind of how it ended up working for me. And that's how I found success in the operating room. But yeah, I agree.
Your podcast is a good example. Like I'm on this podcast and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to spend my time. And it's because you were happy to spend your time, coming to Restore, being a gentleman, taking time, getting up at 7:30 on a Memorial Day weekend and doing a Murph challenge, and not only doing it, but having a sort of once again, an optimism, a sort of level of positivity around it. It's like, listen, this is not a quote unquote transaction, but there's a little bit of an equation here. Like, you put in your inputs to the equation, and because of that, I'm going to respond in a certain way. And if you had not been that guy, if you had not been sort of a beacon of positivity, if you had not been someone that when you'd ask me to do the podcast, I'd be like, dude, you cannot imagine how busy I am right now. And it goes back to that balance of business person, wife, husband,
Yes.
father. I got plenty to do, and
Right.
I got plenty of friends. But when I find somebody that's a beacon of positivity and someone that clearly will, give as well as take, I'm gonna take the time to help them. And I hope that me being on this podcast helps you to, continue down this path. By the way, podcasts are hard. There's a ton of people who do them. There's a limited amount of attention span that people have. And for you to be able to fill that is hard. So if I can do anything to help you, and I'll sort of push this out, hopefully get you some more followers and that sort of thing. But it all started back in the beginning. Before you ever asked for anything, you gave. And I appreciate that. Sincerely.
Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. And I do value your time. And I had zero intentions of even asking you to be on this podcast. But when we met yesterday for the first time, doing Murph together with you, your family, your community of Restore and other people, just being around that positive beacons of light, every single one of us in our own regard, doing that very difficult workout for a higher reason and purpose, to remember those that had fallen. And it was an honor for me to be there. I was grateful to be there with you and the people there. And I look forward to doing it again next year. I just was thinking about how you were a veteran and are now leading in a different way as CEO. And I want to share your story because it's fascinating and it's motivating to maybe veterans out there or to anyone, regardless of if you served. I did not, but I value people that did, and I honor them in my actions.
I'll say this. I mean, I was in the Army and people thank me all the time for serving and being a veteran, but I honestly everyone serves in one way or another. Like, guys who go and sell medical devices, they're serving. Police officers, teachers. I mean, some of are obvious, some are less obvious, but we all serve in our own way. The military paid for my college. And so I should be thanking all the taxpayers out there that provided the money that the military paid for my college. And so for me, I'm like, everybody does their thing, and hopefully it's for good and it is positive. But I don't think I did anything special by serving in the military. It was a great experience. It taught me how to be a better leader. Like I said, they paid for my school. I met my wife.
Right.
I owe way more to the military than the military owes me or society owes me. Wow. And I do think there are people out there that are doing really great things in society that don't get thanked, that don't get, lauded, that don't have a holiday after them.
Right.
And, and I do feel a sense of sadness and even guilt on Memorial Day. Like, I am certainly glad to be alive, and certainly glad I never had to do anything that would lead to me being killed in but I also have friends that did do that. And my wife's a West Point grad. There's a lot of West Point grads that when you go to her reunion, they have to go down the list and say, we wish he was here. We wish she was here, because they have gone and died in combat. And, sometimes, like I said, I don't know if I feel guilt or shame that I didn't do more to be in those spots, but I'm also exceptionally thankful that I'm here and didn't do that. And
I think that's a natural. Sorry to talk. That's a normal, I think, response. Yeah. I mean, having just recognizing that, and thank you for sharing. Your time is so valuable. I have one final question. Sure. I had two, but I'm looking at the clock here, and I don't want to keep you on longer. So you mentioned your kids, and I'm just, as a dad, I'm trying to absorb as much information as I can. My kids are 7 and 9, so we're a couple years behind y'all. I want to give them the world, and I want the huge motivation for what I do and why I work hard is to provide for them. However, at the same time, I don't want to be either a snowplow parent, right? Just clearing the way for them, getting rid of any, roadblocks that they're going to have. And I want what's best for them, but I also don't want them to grow up with a sense of entitlement, which is nauseating to see some of the younger folks that I come across, whether it's they want to get into medical sales or whatever, they have a sense of entitlement that it eats at me. And so I want to learn from you, your advice, or maybe your outlook on this. How do we raise the generation, again, the people that we love so much and that we're here to protect and provide for them?
Yeah.
How do we raise them to not be?
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes it's figuring out what is best for them. And often what is best for them is not what is easiest for them or not what makes them the most comfortable. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it's making them uncomfortable. I hear all the time people say parenting's hard. I actually find it to be the easiest thing I've ever done. Number one, I care about it more than anything else. Number two, I have two lovely children that, just like I said, they came out of the womb as good, kind kids. They're intelligent, they're super athletic. And so, in a lot of ways, I have to keep myself from messing them up, not making them better. And, I have a few guiding principles, try to be consistent, try not to be arbitrary, set a good example for them. They see how hard I work. They see how I treat my wife. They see how I touch my wife. They see, that my daughter sees how I treat her and how I will sing a song to her at night before she goes to bed and things. And, I'm her role model for what a male figure in her life is supposed to be like. And she internalizes that by the way I treat my wife and by the way I treat her. And, I hug my kids, I kiss my kids, I tell them I love them all the time. I also tell them when they're just not doing good enough. And good enough is better than a lot of their friends. And they'll say, Dad, like my friends don't have to do this. And I said, well, the burden you have is that you have been given plenty. So therefore you need to do more. And so I do try to push them. I definitely don't try to solve problems for them. But to be fair, I also don't make them have a draconian hard life. It's a balance. And as long as I don't see any signs of them going down a bad path, I think I'll stick with this. And their job is school, their passion or sports, their job is, other job is to be kind and be a positive force. I tell my kids all the time, you are the protector of the weak. If you see a kid that needs something, if you see a kid that's being picked on, if you see a kid that's, just a little awkward and out of place, you will be the one that will go over and help them.
Beautiful.
And, you can't put all of that on them, but by creating that construct of you are the protector of the weak and your job is school and your passion is sports. Well, those already set up some things. By the way, if your job is school and your passion is sports, if your job is slipping, guess what you don't get to do? Sports.
That's right.
If you're not treating people right, guess what you don't get to do? Sports.
There you go.
All these things. But it is about being consistent, good role model, giving them the cues as to what they should be looking for in relationships and all that sort of thing, and then get the hell out of the way. And don't think that comfort is necessarily what's best for them. There's no way my kids will probably be as hungry as I've been because I came from relatively modest means, but they still got to be hungry. They still got to go find their passion, and hopefully they see that how important that is. And the rest kind of is what it is.
Jim, thank you. I could not have spent this hour in a better way. And I mean that. It's not just for the podcast, even if this thing never launches, which it will. I can't wait to share this with the world. But this was, for me, for a father, for an aspiring, creator of value and growth and business. This was very, very rewarding on a personal level, but also just enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more. So thank you.
It's great. It was great spending time with you. I always enjoyed talking about just life in general and stuff going on. And thanks for participating in the Murph yesterday. Thanks for coming in to Restore. And, you know, once again, thanks for just being a real positive, you know, guy. And I suspect that the podcast is going to work out pretty well, given the way you seem to be approaching life. So anything I can do to help, just let me know.
I certainly appreciate that. Yeah, we'll see. Just, you know, thank you for joining the Sultans of Spine. I will be in to Restore this week to help recover from Murph and to get back into the gym. But thank you again, Jim. This meant a lot.
Good.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Have a
great day.
See you soon.
See ya. Bye-bye.